Good evening. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, we begin our November 7th, 2024 meeting of the Department of Public Works Building Committee. This meeting is in person and virtual. Just read through the remote participation. What I'd like to do is get through a couple of the items first, getting minutes from the previous meeting approved, and then we'll dive right into the review and discuss project estimates, which I'm sure people are most concerned about. Certainly, if anybody wishes to speak or make any comments, please raise your hand. I will recognize you. We're going to try to get as much of the presentations done and then really open it up for a full discussion. But if there's any points of clarification people would like during those presentations, please raise your hand. I'll just ask for your name and street. So, first piece of business, review and approve minutes from previous meeting. These were sent out to the committee members. Meeting was on September 26, 2024. Does anybody have any comments or clarifications?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve as written. Any comments? No. All in favor of accepting the minutes as published, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. One abstention. Any opposed? Nope. Okay. Approved. So, under item 2, new and special business, review and discuss project estimates. Tom, I'll bounce it to you. I know you've been putting together people and things.
Yep, thank you very much. So here tonight is one of the designers from Weston and Sampson, John Cuomo, who will be able to give a little bit more information as well and kind of walk us through the cost estimates. We also have online joining from PMA, who is the owner's project manager for the project. We have Brian DeFilippis and Kevin Weeks, who will be able to provide any additional information as well. So we did receive the cost estimates in that confirmed our thought that something was going to cost about $40 million, which was the DPW construction. It's about $37 million and change. But a lot of the additional costs that go along with construction, soft cost design, contingencies, a lot of the temporary conditions, unfortunately pushed the project estimate to $47,900,000 and change. So we have some work to do on our end as a design team and as a committee. And what we've started to do, Corey has spearheaded that on the town side, is start to identify different items that we can value engineer out. And we're kind of in the infancy of that. John, myself, and Corey have talked about a number of different ideas. And what the hope is here is to talk through the cost estimates. Here are some ideas on ways that we could start to consider looking at the project and maybe value engineering some things. But that discussion really should happen amongst the committee once we've come up with some more concrete proposals. And the intent tonight is to take in as much information as we can as a design team, and then go back to the drawing board and come back with some more concrete suggestions in ways that we could value engineer and reimagine the project at the next meeting. So as of now, or right now, I'd like to call or open it up to John, invite you up to the microphone. I see that Kevin is online, and I'm not sure, Kevin, if you can show on the screen the cost estimate breakdown. And if not, I see Della's here too. I'll bring her into the room. Whichever is more comfortable for you.
Yeah, I should be able to share it in 1 second.
How about now? Okay, thanks. So
Can everyone see the screen?
can see it just fine. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
So before we start, I just want to say that Acton has done something that a lot of other towns haven't done, is they've put together a very detailed cost estimate at a very early stage of design. We typically don't get this type of information until about 60%. And what that means, I think, is that we can make some very good decisions, cost decisions, before we get very far into the actual design of the project. The 47 million is a big number, there's no question. But it's a benchmark and a starting point, and I believe that we have a good group that will work together to get this project where it needs to be budget-wise, while also maintaining the essence of the project, so that, you know, we're delivering a facility to the town and the DPW that they can be proud of and will serve them for the next 50 or more years. Through this process, and we're looking now at the reconciled cost estimate that's being shared, we had two different estimators look at the drawing set that we put together, and I would call this a schematic design plus set. There's more information in this set than we would normally see at this level. We have our own independent cost estimator, TCI, and then PMA's cost estimator also put together, PM&C put together an estimate. When we got both of their numbers, we had a meeting and reconciled them, so that this is the reconciled cost estimate, just for construction cost. And as you see, we're at $37+ million for just for construction. And that's for a 46,000 square foot facility. Go ahead.
John, could you or Kevin enlarge that a little bit? It's, I don't know if that's possible or not.
What, you can have copies of it, yes. No, you're asking if, okay, thank you. Again, the reconciled estimate for construction costs is 37 million, almost 38 million, and that's the starting point. It should be understood that it's not just a building that we're talking about. There's considerable site work that's involved. Underground drainage, there's a geothermal system that's mandated by the Stretch Energy Code. And there's a lot of industrial equipment that's required in a DPW facility that can be quite expensive as well. So all these costs are put together into the building cost, square foot cost. Kevin, do you also have your overall cost spreadsheet that, or Della, I guess, that shows the construction cost with the soft costs? So as Dean mentioned, the construction cost is one component of the total cost. And then there are the soft costs that the town bears typically in construction, which is the engineering and architectural fees that you can perform. Selecting bid alternates, so that if we bid the project, we can get the project under the town's budget. They can elect to select alternates to add in if the bids come in favorably. So, for instance, a bridge crane might be an example of a piece of equipment that could be added later. We designed the structure to support it, include it as a bid alternate during bidding. If the bids come in favorably, add it in. If not, purchase it later and install it later at a later date. But that doesn't jeopardize the project as a whole. Are there any questions at this point from the committee?
Adam?
Hi, thanks. I'm just curious, with the quotation that we're looking at now, I want to know what type of construction this would be. And I don't know if I can articulate my question
Sure.
appropriately, but I'll try. So particularly if I'm thinking of the garage storage for the
Yes.
vehicles, I'm thinking of a hangar-type structure, like steel girders with steel beams, or are we
That's
talking
right.
more brick and mortar?
No, we call it's pre-engineered metal building. Long span steel, primary steel frames, like a hangar. Minimalist in terms of the material. So the skin of the building is an insulated metal panel. It's the outside skin, it's the inside skin. The example of the vehicle storage garage is appropriate because that's the biggest section of the building, of 25,000 square feet. It's also the least expensive to build on a square foot basis. In that space, the costs are for ventilation, lighting, the concrete slab. It's minimally heated, so it's not, there's not a lot of cost there, but it's not brick and mortar construction. It's pre-engineered metal building. These buildings, when they come in, are going about $125 a square foot, and that's for the frame, the wall panels, and the roof. Everything else is then added on to that. So that's the most economical for this type of facility.
And based on the cost estimates that we're currently looking at, are there different design or material choices that would be significantly cheaper, or is this kind of as cheap as this type of building project gets?
There are areas where we can find some cost savings. We often will have a masonry base for durability. So it's a masonry veneer that's mostly around the admin areas and maybe around the fleet, the front of the building at the fleet maintenance garage. That's, I think in this case, it's about $350,000 for masonry. But that also includes CMU block on the inside of the building. There can be some reduction there. The materials themselves, you can't get a heck of a lot cheaper in terms of the skin of the building, because it's the air barriers, the vapor barrier, it's the insulating layer, and the interior finish all in one.
And then what's the sort of tried and true life of these types of buildings? Is it 50 years? Is it 80 years?
No, 50 years is fair. They're not like the metal buildings that you've seen in the past, single metal skin. They have to meet the current structural codes. They have to meet all the current energy codes. They're very well built. So they're not like an off-the-shelf garage metal building. It's an architecture. It's a piece of architecture. It's meant to last 50, 70 years. And I'm sure it'll last longer, but we say it's a 50-year building for sure. Yep. You're welcome.
Other questions at this point from the committee? Okay.
What's that?
Under your soft costs, what's this down fiber?
Mike's not on. Your mic's not on.
Under your soft costs, what's town fiber mean?
Tim Fiber?
Town, F-I-B-E-R.
John, one of the items says
70.
town fiber, and the question is what the town fiber line is. Is that for a temporary, to run the temporary town fiber to the temporary facilities, or is that part of the
I
overall
believe so.
project cost?
Kevin may be able to answer that one.
Yes, typically it's for the temporary, fiber to be run to the temp facilities. It's just it's a typical soft cost we encounter during, DPW projects. It's definitely something that we can, look at further during design.
I was just wondering how hard these soft costs are.
Right now,
Not very high. These are typically what we see for soft cost budgets on our most recent DPW projects. So they're placeholders as design progresses and we get a better understanding of site conditions. Some of those costs could reduce, such as testing services, if the site is, you know, a better site. We may not need to budget as much for that. So there are definitely ways that we could trim as we progress.
But what you're saying is we can't trim before we progress? Or can,
I think we can as we progress, for sure.
Yeah, yes, yeah, it's a work in progress.
If you don't mind, Dean, I'll just make a quick comment about the soft costs, which are currently listed at about 4.3 million, which represents, less than 1% of the total project cost. So as a unit, if you went looking for savings there, probably the maximum you'd find is about 0.5%.
And if I could just add to that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, that as we look at the overall project and start reimagining different things about it, I would imagine those soft costs could potentially decrease as well, or increase depending on what we change.
They could. At this level, there's still a lot of unknowns, so there's still, there's a lot of conservative numbers in there that the estimators are using because they never want to be low. They want to be accurate, but they don't ever want to be low in terms of their estimate. If they say it's going to cost 25 million and the bids come in at 35 million, they don't get work again the next time. So there's, for instance, we don't know exactly the number of geothermal wells we're going to need. We put 30 in as a placeholder because we had a project that was similar. That similar project that we used has since reduced the number of wells. And we think that we can reduce the number of wells here too, but we can't say that for certain until we do the testing and do a test well to find out what the capacity is of the ground source. So there's definitely potential savings in here that we're not seeing yet, and we won't know until we get further along in the design process. I don't know if now is a good time to share. We had a conversation with Tom and Corey and with our OPM, or the town's OPM, to at least start to think about ways to bring the cost down. And I put together a spreadsheet of different categories of cost savings, and it might be of interest to share that now. And I think Della could share that.
Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile. Yep.
Okay, good.
Well, if he's pulling that up, I'll just say that might answer what my next question, which was going to be, which is whether the estimators provide kind of an over-under on this, like what would the minimum be if there were all savings were realized? And I assume that the maximum would be all of this plus the contingencies. But it'll be nice to see what maybe their bottom line number is with savings.
We don't have numbers yet associated with these line items, and that's what our next step is going to be, is to kind of come up with that, determine what those savings are, and then determine if, with the DPW and the committee, if they make sense to pursue. So we'll provide the information that you need to make a good decision about how to proceed with them. Start with potential building scope reductions. So, how do we reduce the construction cost? And this is brought up by the Finance Committee. We thought about this and talked about this too at the beginning. Eliminate the phased construction. So right now the site is so constrained, and the existing DPW building is sitting right in the middle of the site, that either the DPW has to move off completely. It would be ideal if they could, and then turn the site over to the contractor and do the work in one phase. If the town can't find a home, then we have to phase the construction. And we've structured our drawings right now for phase construction so that half or 3/4 of the facility can be built in the first phase. The DPW building then can be torn down. We can move the vehicle maintenance operations to the new building. And that would be as seamless as you could probably get in terms of keeping operations going. And once the building is then torn down, build the workshops and build the administrative offices and employee facilities section of the building, finish the site work. But that does add additional time and expense to the project. If we move off-site, there's cost involved with that as well. So there would be the rental cost of the building, moving costs, rigging costs to move equipment, and also the, I did say rent, but also some renovation costs to get the facility where it needs to be to perform the operations on a short-term basis. If that space is available, it would be ideal. And we have learned that there are a couple of potential sites, and we're going to look at those. I think if we can eliminate the phase construction, that would be a significant savings. It would allow us to do number 2 on this list, which is to kind of shift the building closer to where the existing building is now. That would eliminate some site work. Right now, we're saying this is going to be a net export of soil from the site. If we shift the footprint, that will kind of help that situation as well. So there would be cost savings there. We'd like to look at number 3, which is take a look at, can we reduce the square footage of the building without impacting operations and future growth? So we don't want to design a building today that exactly meets the needs of the facility today. 10 years from now, people will say, well, they've outgrown the facility. Why didn't they build a slightly larger building at the time? But we think that if we look at it, we probably squeeze about, some square footage out of the building, and that could be some savings there as well. I mentioned this before, finalize the number of geothermal wells and hopefully reduce the number. We expect that we can reduce the number of the geothermal wells. Reduce extended masonry base around the building, there could be some savings there. Reduce the overall limits of site paving. Provide a different material instead of concrete at the knockdown pad for the wash bay. And we have a lot of mezzanine space. Now, the mezzanine space that we're providing isn't just for the DPW. It can be used by other town departments. It's inexpensive storage space, indoor storage space, secure storage space, tempered space that I think we have about 10,000 square feet of that, and that exists in all the workshops, in the fleet maintenance garage, and in the vehicle storage garage. But we can look at that kind of, if it makes sense to reduce that, again, without impacting kind of operations and functionality. We looked at potential bid alternates, defer industrial equipment. So these are easier kind of bid alternate type items because they're just pieces of equipment, but they can be expensive as well. So these things might be deferred to a later date. The bridge cranes I mentioned. Maybe we're calling for a canopy addition on the existing salt shed. That could be a bid alternate item as well. That could save money off the base bid price. So the documents now contain like everything that you'd want in a DPW. There is room to kind of look at each of these items and decide what you need. And then we talked about work that could be performed by the DPW. Site clearing, some site excavation, supply some site structures. That could be underground, it could be material storage bins above ground. Perform the final landscaping on the project. We're calling for some sound attenuating walls, sound barrier walls. That could be done by potentially by the DPW. And this one is more of an overall kind of, it probably shouldn't be under the DPW, but as we further develop the design, we should find more cost savings as that happens. So one other item that I wanted to point out is that because we're mandated by the opt-in municipal stretch energy code to be all electric, there are incentives and rebates available for the HVAC heating and cooling systems that we're using. So the geothermal has quite a bit of payback if we can still realize some of the rebates from the Inflation Reduction Act at the time of the construction. Combined, it could be $300,000 or more in rebates back to the project. So there's savings there as well.
Not that that's a large number, but I wonder if those rebates will be still available once our new administration starts.
It's a good question. I don't know. Yep. Not all of them are from the IRA. Half of them or more from Mass Saves, so working with the utilities.
Other questions from the committee?
If you were to, deferring all those things that you had, one was the roof over the salt shed or the canopy over the salt shed, would,
One of the bigger ticket items.
maybe that's your question. Which one do you want most?
Oh, you're talking about the bid
Yes.
alternate items?
I beg your pardon?
The bid alternate items are just in
Yes,
general?
yeah.
I mean, deferring the industrial equipment would be the most expensive, I think.
Yeah, we'd have to have, just looking at those, I mean, having weather-protected storage is always important, but we'd have to weigh that with the crews and the equipment, like the mobile lifts or things that they would need. So we would kind of need to prioritize what, if we had to pick one out of the three, what would be the most critical?
During,
For
right,
operations.
well, when you bid, you have to prioritize the alternates in order of your preference.
So you're saying not the first one is the most critical?
I would say either the first or the third, are probably would be the top two, possibly most important. Depending on which one I would pick, I'd really want to talk to the crews first and get a good handle on the options if we don't do some of that industrial equipment versus having additional weather-protected storage.
No. In my limited experience of building buildings in town, if you do not build for future needs, you shortchange yourself drastically.
Yep.
Even when you think you're building for future needs and find out that it didn't work. So I'm personally in favor of not cutting down on the size and trying to make sure that we give the people who work in that building now under such hard conditions, something, a place that they would want to go to work rather than being dragged there. I mean, it's just so gross.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Well, I guess probably and the committee can discuss this later on, but I think obviously the PMA, Weston Sampson, and town staff are going to have to spend some time pouring through some of these and putting some meat on the bones. But we will talk later on in this meeting about scheduling another building committee meeting, probably in early to mid-December. So we'll give them a little more time to work on these. I think the next item on the agenda is discuss design progress. I don't know if there's anything in particular to report at this point.
We've pretty much completed the schematic design phase. We submitted our schematic design draft. The next steps for us are to sit down and do a page turn with Corey and the DPW to review the drawings and make sure that we're all in agreement, finalize the documents. We do have some ongoing work right now. We're scheduling a hazardous building material inventory. We've included an allowance in the cost estimate now, but we're going to do the inventory in the next week or two. And we've started the environmental phase 1 on the site. And that's ongoing.
Could you clarify a little bit about building inventory?
Yeah, just because we're demoing the existing building, we have to find where the asbestos is and the PCBs and so forth. And the building in that vintage will have some, for sure. Hopefully not too much.
Yeah, when I was working down there, we'd run into a little bit. Hopefully we got rid of most of that stuff when I was wearing that hat as opposed to wearing this hat, but we'll see.
Our guys will find it.
It's always there. Great. Thank you.
May I ask another question?
Sure, yeah.
Do we have a place to put the DPW while this site is being worked on? I mean, that seems to me to be a great cost savings, and I was wondering if we do.
Tom, I don't know if you want to address some of the things that I know you and John are looking at.
Sure. So we've started, I mean, we've been talking about it, but we're looking a little bit deeper into alternative locations, not only for administrative, but for the operations as well. There's not a ton of options because nothing is really built similar to what the DPW has at the site. And to be able to run operations, we really need to make sure that we can get as close as we can. But we're trying to be creative, and we don't really have a full plan rolled out just yet because we have a lot of questions that are unanswered. So a long way of saying that we're still looking into it, and we're hopeful that in the next few weeks we'll have a little bit more of an idea of what we can do for the full operations. From an administrative standpoint, I think it's easier. We have office space that we could find throughout the municipal buildings that we can relocate, staff if we get to that point, but it's really the operations. And Corey, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, it's kind of the biggest hurdles we were finding. I mean, one of the biggest hurdles is in order to keep the mechanics productive and so they can keep the crews going is having a garage space where they can have lifts to be picking up. It's somewhat easy to get, say, a mobile lift to pick up a car or a pickup truck. We're evaluating options for a mobile lift that could pick up the dump trucks and larger equipment so they can work on that. And then if we can find that, then it's trying to find a suitable place where we can set them up. They're probably the most challenging to move. And then for the other operations, just finding a large enough space that they can move around town or wherever to sort of work out of. It's just finding the right pieces to make that all work. And then, because in theory, even if this lasted one winter, or say it did last through 2 winters, then trying to find a covered space good enough that we can protect the equipment, so when a storm hits, they're not spending 45 minutes trying to clean the windshields off and get the trucks warmed up, so. There's different pieces. It seems like the mechanics is kind of the hardest piece, but I think as we explore all these options, and then we can come back hopefully with a way to reduce that construction phasing or eliminate if possible, so.
Thank you. So I guess this kind of points again towards the need for another meeting probably in early to mid-December. Might have some more answers on those questions as well. I think what I'd like to do now is, we've got some other sort of internal stuff about, scheduling meetings with other boards and committees and that sort of thing. But while we've got Weston Sampson here, if there's any members of the public that have any specific questions about the building and the building process, now would be a great time to raise them so that we could talk about it. Please come to the podium and identify yourself, and we'll see what we can do.
Greg Jarbo, 5 Cherokee Road. As you are examining the options of where you may need or want to relocate the DPW operations, if that ends up shortening the process and saving money, that would be a good thing. Is it, I guess this is just a question, is it legal to consider nearby towns who all have DPW facilities where we could basically temporarily buddy up with them, particularly since I'm aware that at least one of the nearby towns is also taking a hard look at a new DPW building for their town and might really, really enjoy having a reciprocal possibility a year or two after we're done. So I don't know if that's legal, I don't know. But we certainly have mutual aid agreements on, the fire department, for example. But is there a way that we could at least touch base and see what we might be able to do with people who actually have DPW facilities, if we could shorten our construction project and save a ton of money, that might be a potential solution. So that's a question and a suggestion. Second, when it comes to planning for future growth, agreed. But what are our assumptions that future growth will be? The schematics that I saw at the last meeting indicated, I believe, office space for 25,
Approximately, yeah.
and we currently have 14. So my question is, maybe 50 years from now, that might take place, but I would like to take a second look at, do we really project that kind of growth in the DPW? I'm not even sure we're projecting that kind of growth in the town's population over that time.
We're projecting about a 10% growth over the life of the facility. I don't know if 25 is the correct number.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think it could be more like 15 or 16.
All right. So that was just another question, observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just responding a bit to that, Craig, I think, it's a good question about the neighboring facilities. But one of the towns you alluded to, Concord, they've been talking about how undersized their existing building is right now. A really nice facility, frankly, is the one in Westford. Sort of the Taj Mahal. But I think, I think it's at least a half-hour drive from here to get to that facility. And, you know, so you. I was thinking of the town to itself. You know, Maynard, I don't know what's even available there. I suspect that Acton is not unique in this particular area about needing new facilities and being kind of cramped, but I think it's certainly, our town manager has some great relationships with the neighboring town managers, so certainly a conversation that should be had. So thank you for that. Any other questions from members of the public?
Tom Beals, Willow Street. You mentioned that the stretch energy code requires all electric.
Correct. No fossil fuels.
What's the marginal cost increase due to that? If you were allowed to have fossil fuels, could there be cheaper solutions?
There would be, yeah, there would be, upfront, there would be cheaper solutions. For HVAC in the estimate, we were at $118 a square foot for the facility. The kind of normal cost for a typical facility that uses natural gas, about $70 a square foot. So it's a $38 per square foot difference, so more expensive.
Over some 14,000 square feet?
Over 46,000 square feet.
46,000.
Yep, so it's a few $1 million, maybe 1.7 to 1.8. And that's based on our estimates now. That does not include any rebates. So there would be, potential to get $200,000-300,000 back. And then, the cost savings over the life of the facility would also be significant compared to, fossil fuel. And you also have to factor in the replacement of equipment over time.
What is the source of electricity? Is it the regular mains?
It's the
that
grid,
service the
yes.
town?
Yep, it's the grid. The roof would be solar ready.
This, as has been mentioned several times in select board meetings and other places, the DPW are the first responders for the first responders.
Correct.
What happens if their power goes out?
Okay, good question. There is a backup generator, and that is allowed to be natural gas or diesel. And in this case, we would have diesel because of the size of the generator that would be required. So they do have a backup generator that keeps the facility powered, yes.
And one more question about the geothermal. I'll try to not make this too much of an engineering question. Is this deep geothermal?
Yes, closed loop, closed well.
And so the heat sink for winter use where heat is being pumped up, the efficiency of the geothermal is such that I assume, aside from the input capital cost of the installation, it's an overall net efficiency compared to, say, natural gas heating.
I don't know if I can answer that. I would assume so. The geothermal heat source, heat pumps are more efficient than air source heat pumps for sure. So there's not going to be an issue when you get down to 0 degrees, very cold temperatures where the air source heat pump becomes very inefficient.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Joe Champ. I live on Forest Road, which is the road I think you're familiar with.
Yes.
Yeah. So speaking for a few people on my road with young families, there's about 12 of us, 12 kids on the road directly impacted by the project, most of whom are under the age of 6, like to ride bikes, take a walk, go down the street with the dog. Not easy to do these days. So aside from the fact that this project is, 46 million, if it runs on budget, which is a whole separate other conversation. A friend of mine who's a selectman in Medway They put in a brand-new DPW for 34,000 square feet at $11 million. So, interesting. His name's Glenn Trindade, if any of you are interested in talking to him. My concern is more from a safety perspective as a parent of young children who have almost been whizzed by school buses, trucks, police cars, fire engines, and people going to the dump on a weekly basis. What is your plan to protect the most vulnerable people in town who happen to live there full-time? This isn't a 9-to-5 job, or in the case of the DPW, 7 to 3:30. This is their home. This is where they live. We don't have a choice to move. What is your plan to protect these kids from what has already been a dangerous and quite honestly, inappropriate level of traffic, where just 2 streets over a year and a half ago, a woman was killed by a truck, and another man was killed crossing the street, and children were killed in a crosswalk. What is your plan to protect them?
I think that's a more appropriate question for the the select board rather than the.
With due respect, ma'am, I live on the street every day. My
No,
kids' lives are in danger.
I'm not
I would like an
saying that
answer.
you don't have a problem, but I'm not sure that he's the person to answer it. I think it's the select board.
Okay, well, is he in charge of the building project? Are there sidewalks or anything like that? Any safety precautions?
That
That's
I'm
what I'm
sure.
asking.
So you're asking for sidewalks?
I'm asking what the plan is.
Okay, if we could, thank you, Ann. I just punched the button to speak as well. And, yeah, I'll agree with Ann. You know, the issues with the neighborhood are certainly something that we're all cognizant of. I've served on the select board now for 6 years. I worked out of that building for off and on for probably 35 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the situation. And yeah, I do think it's certainly a problem for the building, for the entire project, but, you know, I don't think it's something that the architect can really address. I think it is something more appropriately addressed to the select board and the town manager's office. And I'd be happy to discuss that in more detail, either now or certainly later on. I'm sure there's going to be some ongoing discussions.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dean. It looks like you're a member of the select board.
So, you know, here's a couple of the thoughts that I have right off the bat. And, you know, one of your other neighbors kind of raised that same issue at a previous meeting. So I think we've got a couple of different issues with traffic on Forest Road. We've got what I call DPW traffic, you know, the dump trucks and that sort of thing. We've got the other vehicles, school buses and vans and that sort of thing going to the fueling station. So we've got that element of traffic. And then we've certainly got the element of traffic with the residents in town driving down Forest Road as a way to get to the transfer station. So since that question was raised some time ago, I know Corey and his folks have put out some traffic monitoring devices on the road. You've probably seen those, so that we can get some data as to what's going on there. I think during what's always been my conception, and I haven't broached it with the architect, with Corey, but I'm sure he's going to agree with me on this, during the construction process itself, I would expect that the primary construction entrance for the construction project will be off Route 2 and going through the transfer station, so we won't have a lot of construction traffic specific to that building. We'll try to limit that as much as possible so it's not on Forest Road, so you wouldn't see an increase in traffic of heavy vehicles during the construction period. So then, the next question we've got beyond that is, does Forest Road need a sidewalk? And every neighborhood wants a sidewalk, and they all have.
Actually, I prefer just to have safe roads.
Pardon me?
I'd prefer to have a safe road
Yeah.
than a sidewalk.
So I think as far as a safer road, part of that's going to be informed by the information that Corey's going to be generating with the traffic study. We can take a look at that.
Does the traffic study, just curious, Dean, would that pick up on people driving on the wrong side of the road and passing other people? Does it pick up on that?
No, it's strictly volume and speed and the type of vehicles.
Okay, all right. Because you can refer to Officer Gordon, who I spoke to earlier this week, as an example of a town employee speeding double the speed limit, passing another DPW worker on the wrong side of the road as I was putting my children in the car to go to school. That is almost a weekly occurrence, okay? So I don't know if your data loggers are capturing that, but I can tell you as someone who lives on the road that we're witnessing it on a regular basis. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the DPW is here to serve the interest of the town and the safety in the community. Well, to me, it seems to be doing the opposite when it's doing that, okay? So maybe we could take a step back, figure out how to actually keep the town and the neighborhood safe, which, by the way, it may interest you to know that Acton's in a very unique situation. Most DPWs aren't in the middle of a neighborhood. They're on main roads in the back, and yes, a forested area, but not where a lot of houses are grouped. So what we have here, okay, I'm not blaming you gentlemen, because this happened long before you came along, is a unique situation. And so I think we need to be a little bit extra sensitive and mindful of what we have. And to your point about using Route 2 as an access, I think that's a great idea, Dean. We've often talked about that. I don't know why they don't use Route 2 as opposed to Forest more often. It seems like maybe it would take an extra 15 seconds for them to get down to fuel up the vehicles if they did that. Maybe they could take a right rather than come down and then take another left. There's a lot of different options. Clearly, this hasn't been discussed at length before. I'm glad we have the opportunity now. My last question, which I think might be a little bit more applicable to you, sir. What kind of conservational research was done with respect to vernal pools, the fact that there's deer habitat and other wildlife in the woods in between the DPW and Forest Road?
We did do a wetlands investigation and delineation along Forest Road.
Okay. Okay. What does that mean?
That we went out there with an environmental scientist, and they went out with the intent of discovering wetland habitats, and they didn't find any there.
They didn't find any animals. Well, it's funny because my 4-year-old finds ones on a weekly basis, so perhaps you could have used his help. His name's Robbie. He goes to kindergarten in town. Thank you.
I would encourage you to, and hopefully you'll hang around after the meeting so I can give you my card. We can carry on this conversation in a little more detail. Well, these are the kind of things that come up every time we do a project. My observation is that the existing building has been there for over 50 years, and the neighborhood, including Conant School, came in after the Public Works facility.
It's not accurate. My house was built in 61.
There's a number of houses there that have been built since that building was installed. The simple fact is that.
When was the building put in, sir?
Pardon me?
When was the building put in?
I believe they began construction about 1968.
Then it was after all the homes on Forest Road, right near. So you can rebut that statement. And by the way, I might suggest that you update your meeting notes because the last one didn't have anything in it. But what Dean just said was actually very inaccurate. The homes on Forest Road were in there well before the DPW was. In other words, you built a DPW around a community of families and decided that the priority of the DPW and the trucks and everything else was a priority over the safety of the families and the homes that were there first. So that is an inaccurate statement, sir.
I totally reject your allegation.
It's not an allegation. It's a fact. Do you want to see the deed to my home? It was built in 1964, and his home was built in 1961.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't think we're making progress from the conversation. And if we could connect afterwards, because I think you have some points that we need to take in consideration, I think that would serve all of us a little bit better. And if we can move on to the next agenda item, sir.
I just appreciate if someone's making
No, I do think that maybe we could just move on and we can connect afterwards, because I do want to hear what you're saying, but I want to make sure that I'm hearing it. If that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, please.
Scott Sullivan, 8 Patriots Road. I just have two comments. First one is I've attended the prior meetings, and I think in this whole process, I think a before and after would be very helpful for the community to see the benefit, pro or con, of the new building versus the old building and then included in that, I think a time study would be helpful to understand, because one of the needs for this building is to be more efficient. I think seeing a time study before and after would be helpful. And then my final comment is just from a numbers standpoint, because I'm just 2 years ago, I did a floor plan. We just did we reallocated staff and we put everybody on a new floor. And we had, in 9,000 square feet, we put in 65 people. And I think that my memory of the floor plan is that the floor space went from like 4,800 to like 8,800. And you're saying that there's 15 people. Maybe for growth or 25. My numbers could be wrong. I'm just going from memory. But I think that outside of the price of the project, for people that understand square footage for staff, maybe I'm wrong. I think that's something that should just be, clarified and detailed out. Thanks.
Thank you. I can say that the 8,000 square feet is admin office space and employee facility space. The total number of staff at the DPW is 35 people and growing, and that includes workforce, not just office employees. Locker rooms are quite large. Muster rooms are quite large. So that accounts for the square footage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric Heels, 17 Forest Road, Actonian since 1995. ERIKHEELS. And I have it written down because I like to not forget anything and I like to not go off script. But I do want to say that most of this is for the building committee, and I'll also go to the select board with some of these concerns. So I continue to have several concerns about both the approved and unapproved portions of the DPW project. My concerns are in 3 broad categories. Number 1, facts and physics. We need to agree about facts and physics before we can move on to productive discussions about projects and priorities. In response to the Town of Acton's September 30th notice for public comments on the land disturbance permit in relation to the Fuel Island project, I submitted several questions to the engineering department. The following is my question number 6 on the engineering department's reply. PDF page 3 of the October 2nd application states, quote, "The proposed location of the fuel island is currently a wooded knoll and the project will require a significant amount of earth removal, with the deepest cut reaching approximately 8.15 feet, unquote. Presumably, earth removal will also involve tree and shrub removal closest to the 11 Forest Road and 13 Forest Road properties. Noting that the inverse square law states that the intensity of both sound and light is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source, and noting that the new fuel island will be significantly closer to both the 11 Forest Road and 13 Forest Road properties, and thus that the sound and light both significantly more intense, what is being done to mitigate the greatly increased sound and light pollution from 14 Forest Road? Answer. The purpose of the land disturbance permit is to review the stormwater runoff controls during and after construction to ensure it complies with town requirements. There are light shields proposed for the fuel depot canopy. The proposed new access for the fuel depot is located on the existing driveway of the DPW facility. This project will not impact the road shoulder. Following the installation of the new fuel depot, the tree warden will be providing some additional native landscaping alongside the fuel depot when the contractor completes the construction. The design is not anticipated to impact abutters. It is this final sentence that I object to. Any design that brings two things closer together impacts the intensity of the light and sound between those two objects, not just for abutters, but to all within the reach of light and sound. I have hearing loss, and the inverse square law is why I sit far away from the organ as possible in Acton Congregational Church, at least when I'm not singing in the choir. I can demonstrate the inverse square law with this microphone. Let's say that the sound level is at intensity level 3 when I speak from 2 feet. Let's say that the sound level is at intensity level 2 when I speak from 2 feet. When I move to 1 foot away, half the distance, the sound is now at intensity level 9, 3 squared. The design of all aspects of this project impact abutters, neighbors, all of Robbins Park, and all of Acton's residents. The Election Day fire and smoke at the DPW is just one example of this impact. And it should be noted that Robbins Park was here long before the DPW moved to 14 Forest Road. Point number 2, communication and transparency. The DPW has done only the bare minimum with regard to notifying the Robbins Park neighborhood about the proposed project, mailing only abutters with property within 100 feet of the DPW as required by law. If the DPW is looking for buy-in from the Robbins Park neighborhood, they will have to do more than the bare minimum of communication, such as inviting ActonTV to all events like these, measuring traffic with traffic counters on Hosmer Street, not just on Forest Road, and including dates of next meetings on the DPW website page itself. When DPW workers pave, plow, or sweep the roads, I am sure that they do more than the bare minimum. Point number 3, pedestrian and pet safety. Adding sidewalks to the approximately 3,000 feet of Forest Road would greatly improve safety for pedestrians and pets. Yet I note that in the town manager's 10-year capital improvement plan, sidewalks are not planned for Forest Road, one of the busiest and most dangerous roads in Acton. Sidewalks were added for the North Acton Fire Station project. Sidewalks should be added for the proposed DPW project. Traffic control, such as additional stop signs and/or a right turn only rule for traffic entering and leaving the DPW, would also greatly improve safety for pedestrians and pets. In summary, I want to be able to endorse this project at Acton's 2025 town meeting, but only if we can agree on facts, communicate better, and ensure the safety of pedestrians and pets. Eric Heels, 17 Forest Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
And a shout out to the Acton Veterans Group for their mailings.
If you have the opportunity, if you could send that along to us, that would be great. Have that in a hard copy. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Jarbo.
one more question. It was triggered by the comment that we're talking about roughly 46,000 square feet for a facility.
Correct.
I guess the question is, what kind of comparables are we comparing what we're building to? In other words, are there other towns? We heard one mentioned tonight. One I'm aware of is the new DPW building that just got completed in the town of Arlington. And although Arlington is a much bigger town than we are, their new DPW building is 43,000 square feet. So I'm just wondering, what are we looking at when we try to compare what we're doing to comparable communities?
So we do have a list of, a comparison list, and it's based on the services provided, the number of employees, the number of vehicles that the department has. Acton fits kind of right within the kind of its neighboring facilities in that regard. Arlington is one of our projects that we've done. I believe it's considerably larger than that, and there's a large component of renovation of existing buildings there. They're historic buildings, and then the new building is, I think, 43,000, but I don't know what the total is when you include all the existing buildings.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Greg, I'm sure that that the town manager's office can get you copies of this.
Oh, thank you.
This is a DPW building size comparison sheet that was compiled.
Would love that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Jason Cole, 63 Neshoba Road. A couple of hopefully quick questions, softballs. With regards to the geothermal plan of all this, meeting the stretch energy code, are we planning on using batteries in any way, shape, or form?
Not currently, but battery storage could be a component of the solar array that the roof is being designed to support. So
Okay,
that
just
yes.
be aware of the fact that the last major project in town that had batteries, well, it still has not been approved by the Board of Health and
Okay.
still does not have, and therefore is not able to get any of the, it's not able to get the incentives because that's not done. And that building's been occupied now for well over a year. Piece of advice from one of the other recent big building projects in town. One of the things you will be asked for at town meeting, I recommend you have, is an ROI for the meeting green code. I'm fully aware of the fact that the initial costs are higher than the operating costs, and there is some break-even point. Whether that be, on a 50-year building, you've got plenty of potential data points in the middle. You will look better if you can come in at 7 years. You will be in line with some other projects if you come in that 10, 11-year timeframe. If you're looking at 30 years, then maybe you might consider asking the Board of Selectmen for an exemption. Mr. Charter, you spoke eloquently at another meeting saying that you have done quite a bit of site sampling, especially with regard to the fact that another part of the property nearby used to be an open burn pit and was then a dump. A fill pit. You also said that you've done soil samples to make sure that the tanks haven't leaked. That's all well and good. I'm happy with that. My question is, is the amount of soil that's being quoted as having to be moved and potentially would not have to be moved if the building were able to be built in a single phase, is that amount of soil because there are the standard expected runoff of hydraulic fluid and oil and diesel and all the rest of the stuff that one would expect to come out of a DPW building over the last 50 years? Is that why there's an amount of soil that's already been asked to be moved around? And if not, do we have a whole fulsome understanding of what the risks might be? Because what I would hate to have happen, just like we're worried about ledge, I would hate to have you start doing work and go, oh wait, we didn't check for all of these petrochemicals in this section. So it's kind of a two-part question. Does the question make sense? Yes. Thank you, Ann. I can always count on you.
We're doing sampling now, and we expect that there's going to be some impacted soils. There were impacted soils in the past, and that's not unusual for a 60-year DPW facility. The export of soils, and I'm hoping I'm getting this right, for the non-phased, for the phased construction, we were going into an area that has a different topography, so a bit of a berm, and we, need to excavate out that area, which would soon to be non-impacted areas.
Thank you, that makes more sense. So the reason for that soil excavation is to create a more level
Correct.
pad? Okay,
Correct.
it has nothing to do with
No.
bad soil? Okay, that makes much more sense. When we think about an estimate, one of the things that I know that we're very concerned about are the known unknowns. And the known unknown is if there are going to be soil problems or environmental problems. So please make sure you have all those ducks in a row before you come with us with an estimate that we're going to count on. I do want to echo we would love to see the cost estimates for doing it in a single phase. The assumption is if it can be done in a single phase, hopefully we can do it without it actually taking over a winter, which would make everyone's life much easier. And we can plant the larger pieces of equipment all over the place without having to worry about sinking in mud. Is this true? So am I saying the last thing? Got a couple other items that I'll send off to everybody in email form, but the last thing I do want to point out, when you were looking at your value engineering chart, yes, absolutely, the cost of a new canopy a couple of years from now due to the standard rates of inflation will absolutely be higher than buying it now. But doing it ourselves means we do not have to pay a contractor. We'll be doing it with our own.
If that's the case, correct.
And secondarily, not only is it cheaper to do something with your own labor than to pay it out at the highest prevailing union wage within 20 miles, the other thing that's very important to remember is if it is not part of the project, it does not get bonded, and interest rates currently are double what they were for the last two buildings that we did. So anything that you can do to pull out of the project can save you doubly. One, you get to do it yourself and not pay someone else to do it. And two, you don't have to pay interest rates on the work that you've got done. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll send my odds and ends questions to Dean and to the town manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Promise this will be quick.
Yep.
Just one last, this is more of a question than a comment. Obviously, safety is paramount. I think, you understand that.
Yeah, I have kids.
Yeah, well, it's not just having kids do, it's living on the street, right, which many of the kids do. But you had mentioned a sound barrier,
Yes.
which was something that, was nice to hear. Would this be a fence that would be on the interior of the DPW project? So, or where do you picture that sound barrier placed?
So we want to say that we're really trying to be sensitive to the abutters of the DPW. We designed the building to keep the operations as far away from Forest Road as possible. So between Forest Road and the yard operations and the vehicle maintenance garages is a storage garage. So the storage garage does serve as a buffer, acoustical and a visual buffer. So there's an entrance, a single entrance into the garage, a single entrance out of the garage. The sound barrier is meant to kind of protect that northeast corner of the site where the vehicles would be exiting the garage, and there is the salt shed in that area too. So there's active kind of vehicles moving there, dumping salts for deliveries during storm events. You hear the beep, beep, beep of the.
Right, we hear all that, we hear the shouting, we hear everything.
Yeah.
So I guess, is it possible to consider an actual fence, which would be like kind of between the woods and the actual DPW site? And again, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but you said it's further away. I actually thought you were going a little bit into the woods.
We are, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but the main mass of the building that's closest to Forest Road is the storage garage.
Okay,
And it slopes from a low point at Forest Road, the roof does itself,
right.
to a high point interior. So the wall itself there is
Right.
lower.
So I guess maybe my question is, sorry, I'm not being more succinct, but where we're losing some buffer with
Yes.
the woods, maybe perhaps we could get a little bit of like a cedar fence, shrubs, some kind of more permanent buffer between, is that something maybe we could discuss?
I think it'd be something that we could discuss,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any questions or comments to follow up from members of the committee?
What about those buffers that they use on like 95 between the road and the houses that are there? Is there any possibility for having a partial one for, on the DPW side to help with the noise that comes from the DPW towards Forest Road? I have no idea how much that would cost, but.
That's what we have in the plans currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the entire length of Forest Road, but at that northeast corner.
Yeah.
Where the salt shed is and the exit from the vehicle storage garage.
Good.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask when the schematics and the drawings will be available. I think you mentioned they're almost done, or you need to work?
We submitted the draft to the town and DPW. I don't know how they become available to the public or not, so.
We'd be happy to provide those. We can do that tomorrow.
Thank you. All right, moving along. Update on community conversations. Well, we've had a lively one so far tonight. I expect and hope that we have lots more. A couple of dates that I've already got plugged in for bringing this around to folks. Thursday, January 30th, I'm going to be presenting our plans at the Council on Aging at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, pick up a bit of the senior population. And again, on Tuesday, March 4th, I'm going to be doing a presentation at the Acton Lions Club. These have been pushed off a little bit because we want to have a lot of these ideas kind of nailed down before we do a lot of public presentations outside these committee meetings. I think if there are any other members of the committee or the public that have a particular constituency that you think we should be addressing outside the normal boards and committees, certainly let me know that, and we will try to make sure that we can accommodate those. I expect there's going to be a steady drumbeat of this going on right up until town meeting in May. But if anybody does have any ideas of constituencies and venues that we can visit, that would be great. In the past, Weston Sampson's been great with putting together some PowerPoint presentations that have been very helpful for me, in the earlier phases of the project. So please let me know if you've got any ideas. If you've got them now?
I think you should hold a public meeting for just the public and have the design plans prior to, let's see, the town meeting is May 5th or something like that.
Yeah.
So sometime in mid-April, you got to be careful of Patriots' Day, Easter, and all that sort of nonsense, all those kinds of holidays. But I think you need to have, because this is going to be the most expensive project on the warrant, so you have to have a big, you can call it a pre-warrant meeting, which is what the league does, but I think that this should be a single focus meeting. And not only should you have the schematics, but you should have bonding costs and that kind of stuff as well. I also think you should have, prior to that, I think you should have, come let's see the Grotti building tours. I mean, say on Saturday, whatever dates you want, open it up to all sorts of people who won't trip over things, but will look. And so you can say, this is where they do the trucks, and this, take them to the place to show why it needs to be replaced.
Thank you.
I was going to make a suggestion of having a more specific meeting at the DPW facility for the abutters with the schematics once they're in a little bit more final phase, because as somebody who was on the original DPW committee, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of planning involved in what you just went through a moment ago about using the building itself to become a sound barrier and to get the light focused away from the abutters and that sort of thing. So I think it would be a nice kind of less public, more quaint public forum at the DPW facility, maybe just for the abutters to look at the plan so that they can get an understanding of what each of the components means to them, and then they can give their input as well, and that can happen before the final design is finished as well.
I can tell you,
Thank you.
as someone who lives on the street, that's very nice to hear. Thank you. So.
He likes the idea.
Thank you.
So at the October 8th Finance Committee meeting, there was a question about the fact that there's some debt that's coming off the books, and if this override gets approved, some more debt would go on the books, and I think the delta was about 900,000. Does that ring a bell? I'm going from memory, but I'm fairly certain that number is correct. So that if we were able to find 900,000 in savings, either in the school department or anywhere else in the budget, then this project would be a wash. In other words, people's taxes would not increase. So my question is, that was based on the $40 million number. So the question is, now that we've gone to, what, 47? Do we know what that 900,000 goes to?
So I don't think, hopefully the idea didn't come out that it was going to be a wash. I think, some of the scenarios we looked at, there would be an increase in cost.
Well, I think like 2.3 was going on and 1.4 was going off or something like that.
I don't know if Tom's got any updates on that.
I can't give you the exact numbers because I just don't have them at the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that what you're explaining doesn't sound entirely accurate, and we'd be happy to provide a little bit more clarification as we get closer to a final number of what that's going to look like for a debt exclusion override. But I just don't have that information right at the top of my head right now.
All right,
But
well-
I do just want to make sure that, I do reiterate that what you're explaining right now doesn't sound entirely accurate, but we can give you some more clarification as we get a little bit further into the project.
Yeah, well, they did say at the October 8th Finance Committee meeting that, that the first override was sort of with the idea that they could find some savings in the school budget. And that the difference, it's just math, right? If 2.3 million comes off the books and goes on the books and 1.4 comes off, the delta is 900,000.
So the nice thing is that we have two finance committee members in the room who could provide a little bit more information on what was discussed at that meeting too and the intent of it.
My memory of the conversation he's referencing, I believe it was Steve and Christie went through and tried. Steve kind of did some quick math, but it was not a wash. And I think that it would be I think it was an increase to, at the 40 million estimate, I think it was an increase to the tax bill of, I think it was a little bit more than that. It was definitely an increase to the individual. Your $900,000 number, I don't remember that number at all.
That's the annual.
Yeah,
For the debt servicing.
what's the 3 for? 3 what?
He was saying 900,000 first.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
probably, we'll let
Go
one other
ahead.
finance committee member weigh in, and then ultimately, obviously, we need to pull these numbers together so that
It was a
rather than
back of the
rely on.
envelope calculation. It was considered, it was at 40 million, it was an increase to the tax bill.
I think the important note to make is that the Finance Committee will be doing a full review of this now that we have new numbers. So I would say, I would encourage you to pay attention to the next Finance Committee meeting and hopefully get some clarification on that. But I will say that there's two separate topics that you brought up. One is the debt exclusion of the DPW facility building if it goes forward and what that does to raise the taxes. And the separate issue on any savings that might be had from the school budget is kind of wholly separate. But yes, the two of them work on the same scale to balance the scale, but they're two wholly separate topics, and one doesn't necessarily wash the hand of the other or work with the other. So that's, I'd say, pay attention to the next Finance Committee meeting and get some more clarification.
Thank you. Moving ahead, presentations, other boards, committees, and commissions. I think Tom and I are going to be working out a schedule within the various committees that we'll be reaching out to. Conservation Commission, Green Advisory Board. I'm sure we'll be back before FinCom on a number of occasions. Design Review Board will be working through all of those, but we've really got to kind of schedule them around when those boards and committees meet. And those sorts of meetings, I think, will be fairly low-key with just a couple of myself and maybe one or two staff members going presentation and specifically trying to tease out any ideas that folks might have. I know there's been discussions in the past about, the impacts of the existing operations on the wetlands and the wildlife. Certainly, that's a good conversation to have with Conservation Commission. So we'll be moving ahead with those. Unless anyone has any comments on that. Continued public education and outreach efforts. I think, I've got some great ideas here that have been brought forward about some meetings with the neighborhood on site. So we'll be moving ahead with those. If anybody has any additional thoughts that they'd like to bring forward about public education, I'd be happy to hear it.
Mr. Chair, we'll just note that as we did with the last meeting, we'll be putting the video, but a much more professional video of this recording on the website for information too. So as we have those conversations and we direct people back to the website and anyone here, you'll be able to see the first meeting, which was September 26th, and then this one as well. And the minutes that were referenced before, they were approved tonight. We'll get them up on the website. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to note those things because a couple times it came up throughout the meeting.
Great, thank you. Okay. Administrative matters and updates. As I alluded to earlier, we were talking about probably need to have another meeting based on feedback we get during the value engineering process. I've got a couple of dates that I know will work for me within the time period, but I'll see how they rest with the rest of the committee. I think Wednesday, December 4th, Wednesday, December 11th, or Thursday, December 12th would all be good dates for me personally, fitting in with a bunch of other stuff I've got going on.
I could do the Thursday.
Thursday? No, we have had pretty good luck with Thursday so far.
That was December 5th?
No, December 13th.
12th.
I can as well.
Okay. So we will have our next meeting on Thursday, December 12th. We'll have it hopefully in this room. We'll check with scheduling to make sure we don't have any conflicts with that. We'll get that out on the website and we'll post the agenda well in advance.
7 p.m. 7
Yep,
p.m.
7 p.m., yep. And
So we going over schematics at that time or not?
I think we've got the schematics, don't we? Yep. We'll get them out to you.
Are they different from the ones I saw before?
I hesitate on asking a question with a question, but were those the ones that were hanging up in my office?
They're the ones you gave me, like, in September?
Yep. I'll circulate the most recent documents we received from the designer, either after this meeting tonight or tomorrow morning, and they'll be in your email inbox.
Since don't like to look at things online, I would like a hard copy, please.
We can accommodate.
Thank you.
Okay, date of the next update of the select board meeting. This is a standing item on select board agendas. It's going to be there until May, so I will be updating and other people as necessary. So our next select board meeting is a week and a half out, so there'll be another update. I don't know if there'll be a lot of new information that we haven't covered tonight, but certainly if anybody wants to raise issues that they think would be germane to not only the specific four walls of the building, but certainly the impact on the neighborhood, I'd encourage you to come to a select board meeting as well. We've got some time at the beginning of every meeting for residents' concerns, and then when we have a specific agenda item, we always ask for additional comments. Due to time constraints, we try to keep the comments to about 3 minutes, but we certainly encourage folks to provide written comments as well, either in advance or after the fact, so that the entire select board can hear your concerns. Unless somebody...
I was just thinking about, we used to get to the dump by going across Hosmer Street. That's totally out of the question now because of the state highway and all that sort of stuff. I mean, and I can't see the people from my area going down Route 2 around the circle and trying to come up again, unless you do something to make it prohibited to traffic from going down Forest Road to Hosmer and around to the thing. And I'm not sure you can do that either.
No, that's an issue whether we expand and replace the building or not. But certainly, I know Corey's been working on some ideas, and we hear it. If we've got situations with DPW employees where that's something needs to be addressed, but I've heard your concerns, and they're not going to be swept under the rug. I'd be looking for one last motion if anybody care to make one.
Second.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to adjourn. Discussion. In favor of adjournment at 20 minutes to 9, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you.